So we continue with our how we try to see in the since the contribution of Muslims or early medieval scientists, or how they were fundamentally responsible to the later scientific revolution, which has not been reported as widely in that sense in the popular literature. But in this lecture, we are going to just focus specifically on a particular discipline, which is normally called logic, but it's also called in the Islamic idiom, it's also called Mantiq, and maybe Ilme, kalam, and sister disciplines which interacted with them, as well as other disciplines like that of jurisprudence, theology, and the whole matrix of it, in to properly contextualize things in that sense, so that we can make sense to not only logic and sciences in particular, or sciences in general. So from Greeks to the present times, to make a sense of the things, and where we can localize or place uh, Islamic these sciences in perspective, or in a retrospective sense, or as well as in the prospective sense, the way. So we are this time in this lecture taking Iqbal as a referent in terms of inspiration. So maybe he has not dealt deeply on this, apart from 2, 3, 4 sentences where role of logic is emphasized, how Ibn Hazm and Ibn Taymiyyah, as well as how scientific the scientific method has been primarily to be credited to Muslim way, how they try to see in that things in the larger context. But taking that thing inspiration, so we are going to connect many things. So whatever that extrapolation is, so maybe so there are a lot of extrapolations which we are going to which I am going to make in some sense. So in that sense, maybe Iqbal should not be held responsible for that, whatever the things what I am going to say in that sense. So in that context, what we are going to say is, in the sense, the way logic has been an important instrument in trying to do things. So starting from the way Aristotelian elements, Aristotle's these posterior analytics, prior analytics, syllogistic reasoning in that sense, and in the Greeks, the way the Stoics, the way Zeno. So there is a whole school of logic which we can appreciate in that sense, and how it traversed or traveled from BC to 9th century, 10, how it was rediscovered, or how it was reinterpreted, or how it was reformulated or formulated in some sense, starting from maybe Al-Farabi, then Ibn Sina, then Imam Razi, maybe Imam Ghazali, and then whole continuing to lot of scholarship, how it the logical thing also, the way I said in the previous lecture, how these disciplines or sciences, they traversed not only places but lands also, from Ottomans to maybe to Central Asia, to Arab lands, to Indian subcontinent. So the geographical map by which these sciences traversed, it spans huge geographical area, apart from how it just primarily interacted with these Aristotelian sciences or peripatetic school, and how a lot of the invocation of Farabi in getting Neoplatonic elements into this logical thing, as well as the way it was seen as isogogy, how people free formulated these debates in isogogy, or what we call makulats and mankulats, the terminology, the Arab terminology or Arabic terminology, as well as how not only it also got these discourses or debates got somehow intermeshed with the debates in linguistics, debates in grammar, as well as the Quranic way of looking at things in that sense, the edges of Quran, or how it has to be seen in 11th century or 12th century in that sense. So there can be the way logic, the way the Aristotelian elements, the way they were interpreted by Ibn Sina in his book, or the way Burhan was written by Farabi and Burhan 1 and Burhan 2, in that sense. So you can say the cut point of the Muslim theologians or Muslim, these logicians, or people who knew Mantiq. Later, it was the referent was not taken primarily as Aristotle, because a lot of water had flown through the river, and the way the primacy of Aristotelian logic, it was replaced by how people saw, people took Avicenna, and how things later got seen in that sense. So here there is a huge scope, whether you take Ibn Hazm, Ibn Ghazali, or even Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, in that sense, and Suyuti, and a lot of people, they were not only. But here one thing is that logic or Mantiq as a discipline, how it was taken by philosophers and scientists, maybe differed from how Mantiq or logic was taken by legalists and theologians. The philosophers and scientists were primarily very much appreciative, wholesome in that sense, while in case of legalists and theologians, some would appreciate logic, like Imam Ghazali taking logic as an important discipline, or Ibn Hazm in that sense. But many theologians derided taking wholesome faith in logic. Logic should be taken merely as a tool, or should it be taken as what I should say? Should it be taken merely as a tool, or it has its separate domain, or it may lead you to? It may distract you from the primary objectives in that sense. So how legalists and how theologians perceived logic or Mantiq in jurisprudence, or in matters of in their matters, and how philosophers and scientists did it. So it's also an interesting thing how this discipline of Mantiq evolved over centuries in the whole edifice of Muslim discourse in that fundamental sense. So, and how in the later stages, when this Mantiq, how it got translated or transported in the later centuries in that sense. So here the aim of this lecture is also to conflate, or to see this the presence, or what I say, relegation of these Mantiq discourses or logic, or Ilme kalam in the presence of how in the 19th century and 20th century, how these logic seen primarily, how it evolved post Renaissance from Leibniz onwards, and how maybe symbolic logic is seen in that sense, and how empiricism and logicism, or logical empiricism as a fountainhead, or as a fundamental edifice, how logic is fundamentally placed in the modern disciplines or discourses, whether you go from mathematics to computer science to linguistics and many plethora of other disciplines, including cognitive sciences and other fields. So here the thing is that why did Mantiq or these disciplines of logic, Muslim, these disciplines which were in vogue for 5, 6, 7 centuries or 8 centuries, whatever, from 11th century onwards to 17 in 18, 19th century in Indian Mughal India, in these Farangi Mahal discourses, it's having a huge span. So why did it not incorporate or make a relation with these changes or these sciences, contemporary sciences of symbolic logic in that sense? And why was it relegated to that sense, in that sense? So this is also one of the important questions, because if we address this question, it will in turn address a lot of other related questions in that sense. So we'll also try to attempt how we can see this question also in that sense. And maybe apart from that thing is that this Mantiq or logic, it was the way I said, legalists and theologians took logic with a pinch of salt. Some of them appreciative, some appreciative in some bits and amounts. So here comes the famous discipline of Ilme, kalam, which in medieval theological discourses would say how can see the veracity of God or Allah in that sense. So philosophers or theologians from Al-Kindi onwards, how they took those arguments, contingency arguments, cosmological arguments, which are there, or kalam, cosmological arguments in that sense. So how those argumentations or how those arguments are closely related with the arguments from this Mantiq or logic, and how do we place Aristotelian syllogistic reasoning in that sense, where we have major premise, minor premises, and conclusivity is also there. How we can derive conclusions, whether deductive conclusions or how we can have inductive inferences. So this is how we can place all of these things, modulo the fact that the medieval Burhani discourses were also influenced by the way, for example, there is a Quranic ayat, Kul in kun khatu, the Quranic ayat which says, Ya ayyuhan nasu قد جاءكم برهان منكم ربكم وأنزلنا إليكم نورا. Yeah, there is something, Kul hatu burhanakum in kuntum sadiqin. So get an argument if you are true. So this burhan, even the very word, Quranic word burhan, if you are true in your spirits, get a decent argument towards that effect. This burhan thing, the way Farabi's book Burhan or Burhan by Ibn Sina. So this Burhan, Quranic way of looking at, get an argument, decent argument if you are true. So truth is related with Burhan in that sense. So Burhani in that sense, Burhani spirit, the spirit. So how it also interfaced with Mantiq, logic, and disciplines of Ilme Kalam. So this is a whole trajectory to it. So we are going to see how we can relate this entire discourse in that sense. So first I'm going to read some, so we'll start. So I'm going to read some of the words, maybe it's in Urdu, so wherever I feel I'll translate it so that I will have a flavor of how the vocabulary, so we'll be comfortable with how the people from Ilme Kalam and Mantiq, the terms and terminologies which can be, we can appreciate it in that sense, and then we can go forward in whatever I have tried to give the picture or the way I would like to just steer this lecture in that sense. So here the argument goes. So if I've taken these things from so the references of which I have in the blackboard. So I'll just say in Urdu, maybe then where I'll appreciate. So Bari Tala ya to Qadim hoga ya to Hadis hoga. इधर ही इज कदीम इन दैट सेंस और हादिस होगा। हादिस कदीम के वजूद को रफा करता है। बारी ताला जौहर नहीं, बारी ताला जौहर नहीं। जो महल हादिस हो वो हादिस होता है, बारी ताला वाजिबुल वजूद है। दिस इज वे गॉड्स सिफात आर देयर इन दैट सेंस। बारी ताला के जिस्म के नाम का नाम होना साबित होगा। जिस्म तो है मगर दूसरे जिस्मों की तरह नहीं। गॉड इज ए बॉडी नॉट लाइक अदर बॉडीज। बारी ताला की जात किसी में हुलूल न कर सकता है, कोई शख्स इसमें हुलूल नहीं कर सकता है। जिस्म का वजूद अर्ज है, वजूद से पहले होता है, इसकी कोई मिसल नहीं। द वे वी हैव कुरान लाइसा कमसल मिसलिही। लफ्ज़ कलाम हादिस है, कारी की सिफत हादिस है, सिफत इरादा भी हादिस है। बारी ताला मौसूफ है कलाम से, बारी ताला का कलाम कदीम है, हादिस नहीं है। बारी ताला के साथ ज़ात की कुदरत का ताल्लुक खल्क का है। So in that sense, this is the way we have debates of hadis and kadim. If the universe had a beginning, or things got they were created suddenly, that's hoods in that sense, without the reference to some causality, or they were eternally existing. How this is the vocabulary people just use in those terms to make me comfortable with how things from ilme kalam. So आसान मंतिक तस्वुर के तहत इल्म की हाउ यू डिस्क्राइब नॉलेज। इल्म और उसकी किस्में। इल्म किसी चीज की सूरत का जहन में आना, और इल्म की दो किस्में हैं, तस्वुर और तस्दीक, एसेंट एंड जजमेंट। सो तस्वुर एंड तस्दीक। तस्वुर की दो किस्में हैं, तस्वुर बदीही, तस्वुर नजरी। मंतिक वो इल्म है जो नजर और फिक्र की गलती से बचाए। सो लॉजिक इन दैट सेंस इज दैट डोमेन ऑफ नॉलेज which will make you not to draw erroneous conclusions. So one thing is known as mufarad and another is known as murakkab, composite and not composite, kulli and juzi. So वजूद बारी ताला की को साबित करने के लिए दलाइल की दो किस्म हैं। So there are two arguments to prove existence of God. The medieval logicians or medieval people from Ilme Kalam, how they just get right. One is known as Dalail Ilmi and other is known as Dalail Immi. Means you go from cause to effect or you go from effect to the cause. So Quran में 80 से ज्यादा दलाइल इन्नी है। So there are more than 80 arguments in Quran where time and again you can see the ayahs of Quran where it's emphasized that don't you see the creation, and where does it point to the existence of the creation, the existence of creation, the winds, the back of the camel, the plants, you go from living thing going to non-living things, and non-living thing coming to living thing. So all these things just point to the existence of creator in that sense. मखलूक से खालिक की तरफ इस्तिदलाल हादिस से कदीम के वजूद का इस्तिदलाल है। माकुलात के उलमा ने इस्तिदलाल किया। अल-आलमु हादिस, हर मखलूक के लिए खालिक चाहिए, हादिस के लिए मुहद्दिस चाहिए। हुदूस की दो किस्में हैं। अर्ज तो है हादिस जिसके साथ कदीम है, इसको कहते हैं जौहर। अर्ज को हादिस करना, हादिस को मुतम करना। अर्ज का हुदूस बदी है, हरकत या सुकून। जिस्म, हरकत और सुकून दोनों हादिस हैं। So this is a very medieval debate. What is hadis and what is motion and rest? The way we have in Newtonian thing, everybody is considered to be in the state of rest. state of motion, the surroundings are in rest, or a body is in a motion rest, the surroundings are in. So you can not define motion and rest in absolute terms. So these discourses, maybe you can, they were basically the debates of these सुकून एंड हादिस इन दैट सेंस. जिस्म या मुतहरिक होगा या साकिन होगा, अदम लाहक हो या अदम साबित हो, जो मुहल हादिस हो वो हादिस होता है. मुहल हादिस कदीम नहीं बल्कि हादिस होगा. मीन्स वेयर दिस मोशन is existing in some body, so it's not eternally present, it is present at some point in time. So body itself, it cannot be infinite, it can be finite, because motion is in the body, it means it's both motion and body, they are finite in that sense. Because एक मुमकिन के वजूद से पहले अदम पैदा होता है. So nothingness, the coming of existence, nothingness. So here I just said it the way now where the Quranic discourse. How ya ayyuhal nasu qad ja'akum burhanun minkum rabbukum anzalna ilaykum nura. Indeed, bila shubha Allah की तरफ से तुम्हारे पास एक दलील आई है. There is an argument which has come from God. और हम तुम्हारी हिदायत के लिए चमकदार नूर उतारते हैं. We have Kul hatu burhanaka in kuntum sadiqin. So if you have argument, so if you are true in your spirits, let you get an argument. So हक ताला वाजिबुल वजूद है. So this is important thing. यानी इसका वजूद जाती है, किसी गैर से मुस्तार नहीं है, वरना वो गैर का मुख्ताज होगा. Means God's existence is not dependent upon anything else in that sense. लफ्ज़ खुदा खुद पर दलालत करता है, मतलब it has come on its own. So now this is a very important argument in Ilme kalam, where it says आलम के तमाम अज्जा अज़बाइत और मुरकबात महदूद और मुतना ही अज्जा हैं. So everything which we see in the universe, it is finite and it can be composed of parts. So it's not infinite. So from this we can have, जब आलम के तमाम असबात बसाइत और मुरकबात महदूद और मुतना ही, तो आलम भी फिर ज़रूर महदूद और मुतना ही होगा. So this means universe cannot be infinite, it has also to be finite, because anything which we see in the universe, it can be broken into parts in that sense. So it's finite in that sense. So if it's the parts of the universe are finite, so universe is also finite in that sense. So it cannot be infinite. So जब इल्लत कदीम है तो मालूल क्यों हादिस होगा in that sense. So if the cause is pre-existing, why should the effect be also sudden in that sense. So जिस्म का हादिस और कदीम से मुरकब होना लाजिम है. So what the body maybe it has been created in the past in that sense. So now here come the other debate, the soul or रूह, whatever in that moral discourses. So अगर मादा और रूह कदीम होती, इसमें तगय्युर नामुमकिन होता. So if body and soul, they were kadim, so if they were pre-eternally existing, there will be not much change in that sense. So there will be inertia. But since there are changes which are observant, so this means they cannot be a thing. इस वजह से गजाली ने इब्न सीना और फाराबी की तकफीर की. Farabi and Farabi and Ibn Sina, they considered world to be eternally existing. So that way Imam Ghazali critiqued him in some rational sense in the argumentation which follows, that the world cannot be world is finite in the sense, it cannot be infinite in that sense from this argumentation which was sent. So Qadim apne wujud mein hadis ka muhtaj hai. What is existing from past, ये hadis का it was not eternally existing, it was कदीम अपने वजूद में हादिस का मुख्ताज है. खुदा ताला मुसव्विर नहीं बल्कि वो खालिक बारी है. So God is not like painter, he is painting something, he is creating things ex nihilo. रूहानियत तमाम तर लतीफ़ है और जिस्मानियत कसीफ है. लतीफ़ का कसीफ से अफजल होना बिल्कुल ताहिर है. So this is the sort, you can say, you have the flavor of how people, the argumentations of people from Ilme kalam can be taken in that sense. So now we are going to see how Mantiq think, how you can see it, Mantiq in that sense. So how we define Mantiq? So Mantiq is a canonical tool by which mind is protected from making mistakes while it's contemplating, or fikr is there. So the purpose of Mantiq is to protect mind from making mistakes while contemplating. So what are the subjects of Mantiq? Maruf, Qawl, Dalail. So maybe in this sense, people from Mantiq, they take Aristotle as first teacher, Farabi as second teacher, and Ibn Sina as the third. And there we have something called tasawwur and tasdeeq in that sense. So the way we defined previously, how we define ilm. Ilm is the process of knowledge, its process of obtaining image in the mind. And hukum or judgment is the affirmation or negation of the thing or the other in that sense. And we have tasawwur and tasdeeq, affirmation in that sense. And we have tasawwur badihi and tasawwur nazri in that sense. And we have dalala in that sense, and so many things. And there's also something called lafz or word, because this whole school of linguistics is also related to, in that sense, word in sound. And word in that sense, whether it's mufarad or whether it's murakkab, it's compound or it's singular. Later we are going to see how logic is intricately related to it in that sense. Logic, not only logic and grammar also. So we have mushtarak, we have qiyas, and in qiyas or istiqra, which is normally called syllogism. Syllogism is the way we say in that sense. For example, Aristotle is a man, all men are mortal. This means Aristotle is mortal. So in more than two sentences, the third sentence, the conclusive is there. This is a sort of a syllogism, or qiyas. So, but in qiyas or istiqra, so we have the categorization of Aristotle syllogisms was extended by Ibn Sina to include not only categorical syllogisms, which are definitive, but also include non-categorical syllogisms. Not only non-categorical syllogisms, but also include elliptic thing, something called modality, the notion of time in those statements which evolve in time in that sense. And the way we have qiyas, we also have qiyas istiqrai, mutawatir. We have qiyas burhani, qiyas jadli, and qiyas. And so in that sense, so if the positive, so this is the thing. And the way we have conception, we also have, so how we define, the way in mathematics, the definition is how we define things. So in Mantiq discourses, we call something called had, and which was later maybe used by legalists also in that sense. So here first we are going to see Avicenna's theory of maybe logic in that sense, and Avicenna's theory of logic in that sense. So before continuing with the Avicenna's theory of knowledge, so we'll just first see in the sense that so Al-Farabi's maybe so we'll take some break and otherwise this lecture will be a bit longer, and maybe we'll continue with it later in that sense.